Hello, guys, and welcome back to the fourth ever episode of Keeping It Spooky. I'm your host, Luke, here with my co-host, Ink, Stink, whatever. And yeah, we recorded a fourth episode, but we didn't really like how it turned out. So you know what? We thought let's recuperate, let's retry, move on to the 2024 NFL season. Let's move past the 2023 season. Congrats to the Chiefs. No one cares. Season's done. Now, let's move on. This episode is going to be mainly free, or it is just free agents, because that's all like we're really interested in right now. Today, a lot of tags came out, or who won't be getting tagged. The main tag so far was T. Higgins to the Cincinnati Bengals. He's coming back. A thing that we didn't really expect, but fair enough. T. Higgins gets his 20 mil and fully deserved, to be honest. But I would have liked to see him on another team just to see him flourish.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, T. Higgins is one of the better receivers in the NFL, and just seeing him thrive as a wide receiver one again, which we haven't seen since his rookie year, and that's not like a fully developed version of him. So if he could stay healthy and be a wide receiver one on a different team, that would be awesome to watch. But now he's on a prove it deal. Really, he's on that 1 year, 20 mil, so he gets some money this year, but he needs to prove that he's capable of being that playmaker that the Bengals or any other team would want. Because the past few years, he's really dealt with a lot of injuries. So we'll see how he does this year and see if he's worth that 20 mil next year.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting to see. I think the Bengals are kind of in a situation where they think they can contend, and I think that was the right move to tag him. They just still need a lot of help on the defense and offensive line, though, if they really want to beat the Chiefs or whatnot. But anyway, I think let's move on to the free agent running backs because that's a very hot topic at the minute. Saquon Barkley wasn't tagged by the New York Giants. The mistake of last offseason of tagging Saquon and then signing Daniel Jones that huge contract, and now they might not bring Saquon back at all. Inc. Who do you have Saquon Barkley going to?
I mean, really, there's no way that they could have tagged Saquon again. They already gave him a prove it deal. He proved how valuable he is as a running back in this league, and they're still not going to pay him. The Giants are not in a position to pay a running back that sum of money when the rest of their team is not up to par. So Saquon's gone, and we've alluded to this before. I think Saquon is going to the Houston Texans, and my reasoning for that being the cap space is there, the franchise quarterback is there, and the Houston Texans are entering a contending window. The best spot to be in as a franchise is when your quarterback is young and on a rookie deal. When your franchise elite quarterback is on a rookie deal, so you can build around them. You can, and the Houston Texans are in like top 5 in the league in cap space this offseason. So they're going to be making some moves, and I think Saquon Barkley is one of the ones that they definitely should make.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better. 100% agree. I think the consensus is really Saquon to the Texans. I mean, it fits like a glove. It's a perfect fit. For fantasy value, I know that's what most of you guys are listening for. I have him as a low tier RB1 drafted in the middle to late second round. It's still Saquon. There's still gonna be a lot of name value. He's still gonna get a lot of hype and deservedly hype. But there's clearly better running backs than him available. But Saquon and a new team could be scary for all I know, and I think it's definitely worth, at least right in this stage, a second round pick on him.
There's definitely more exciting running backs looking into next year. You have the guys that broke out this year, guys that were rookies this year, like Jameer Gibbs, like Brees Hall, like Kyron Williams, Bijan Robinson, obviously Christian McCaffrey, who's been a mainstay at the top.
Hmm.
And Saquon isn't quite at that level, but I think he's the really like the next man up. Like he's above guys like Travis Etienne or like the Rashad Whites of the world. People like that. I think Saquon is well above them, just below that top category.
Yeah, like a tier two.
Mhm.
I think it kind of goes hand in hand with ETN. I mean, it's preferable, whatever you want, but I think Saquon I think he's has a higher floor than ETN. I think you can trust Saquon unless he gets injured, obviously, which would suck, but let's not rely on that. Let's not count on that. Moving on to Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry has been the best running back in the league for the past, I want to say 5 to 6 years. Outside of maybe McCaffrey as well, but Derrick Henry, as we know, is just beast. He's getting up there a bit in age now. Last season for the Titans, he was solid. He wasn't Derrick Henry solid, but he was still solid. He still performed for your fantasy teams. I have Derrick Henry to the Dallas Cowboys. I think Jerry Jones is looking to make a splash or a big name like signing or whatnot. I think Derrick Henry could fit that role. Tony Pollard, who we'll get to later, wasn't really the role that Cowboys needed, obviously. And I think Derrick Henry, they might bring in guys with Derrick Henry as well or draft someone, but Derrick Henry, he's going to be a touchdown monster for the Cowboys, really reliant in that offense. I think he could go in like the fourth round if he's on the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a Cowboy, the expectations placed on you just become that much higher. And Derrick Henry has lived up to everything we've wanted him to be as an NFL running back in his starting tenure with the Titans. He's been absolutely electric in every way, been an absolute bulldozer. And when it comes to end zone production, that's where the Cowboys really lacked last year. You kind of alluded to that. They weren't scoring up close. Not a lot of rushing touchdowns for Tony
Yeah.
Pollard last year. And Derrick Henry can definitely get in that end zone. The Cowboys have a great offensive line. There's really no reason that Pollard shouldn't have been getting in. But signing Derrick Henry could help assure you of that, that you'll be getting those touchdowns. So the floor would definitely be pretty high with Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
He'd be like a mid-round running back in that scenario if he went to Dallas.
Yeah.
Me personally, though, I have him going to Baltimore. I've been saying this for a while. Baltimore is gonna have to maneuver a few things around the cap this offseason because they need to bring back Patrick Queen, a few other pieces.
Yeah.
Um, but Derrick Henry is what their running game needs, really. Keaton Mitchell tore his ACL. I really liked him, but he's not a starting running back in the league. He's kind of like change of pace guy. And Derrick Henry could be the true bruiser that they need in the running game, that they wanted Gus Edwards to be, but Gus Edwards is not Derrick Henry, you know?
Mm.
So Derrick Henry, lower than I would rank him if he was a Cowboy, but still like a mid-round running back, in my opinion, if he went to the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I think with Derrick Henry going to the Ravens, I just feel like the Ravens are going to prioritize other positions more than running back. Obviously, they're going to need a running back because J.K. and Gus Edwards are both expiring, and then Keaton Mitchell, as you said, is injured. But I feel they have to re-sign their guys first. Patrick Queen, they're going to hope to get back. But that's going to be difficult. But yeah, I wouldn't mind Derrick Henry to the Baltimore Ravens at all. Moving on, Josh Jacobs. Now, Josh Jacobs is a very interesting one. Wasn't tagged today like he was last offseason. Last offseason, there was a lot of contract disputes. He wasn't really, he was drafted like later than he was supposed to just because we didn't really know what was going on with him. I don't see him returning to the Raiders, to be honest. I think that whole last offseason was a little messy for me, and I don't see him returning to them. I actually have him going to a division rival in the Los Angeles Chargers. I think it makes sense in my head. Uh, Jim Harbaugh is going to look for a workhorse running back, a proven guy. I think Josh Jacobs is proven, and he can be a workhorse guy if they need him to be, and he will be very nice in the Chargers. Justin Herbert needs a guy like that. If he goes to the Chargers, I would have him drafted around the third round.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs. I have the same thing. I have him going to Los Angeles. It's just a Harbaugh signing in general. They want something to excite the fans. Right now, the Chargers are in cap hell. They're probably going to find a way to get rid of Joey Bosa, might cut Khalil Mack. Mike Williams is expendable.
Yeah.
All those guys that could be moving out. So Harbaugh, in his first season as the Chargers head coach, they want to contend. They want to make moves. Get an elite running back that you haven't had yet. Josh Jacobs can do it in the passing game and in the running game. He's really a do it all back. He's not really towards, like, I wouldn't say he's top end talent, but I'd say the production is fantastic and the volume is also great. So for fantasy purposes, he'd absolutely be a third rounder if he went to the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that highlights Josh Jacobs is in 2022, he was, I want to say the RB2 on the season. Maybe,
3.
okay. He was up there, though. He had an incredible season, won many people their leagues just because he was drafted so late. People undervalued him. Going to the Chargers would be very sexy. sexy pick. This year he riddled with a lot of injuries, but I don't know. It was weird how the Raiders handled that. They didn't put him on IR. They just kind of kept rolling him out. I feel like that's like a red flag for him re-signing to the Raiders. So something was off there. So I think the Chargers makes perfect sense in my head. Obviously, he could go to another team, but Josh Jacobs and the Chargers definitely a good third round pick. Um,
You're a freak. You're a
why?
freak. You just really wanted to say sexy. Like
Yeah,
the way it didn't really slip off your tongue. You kind of like exaggerated it, and I felt a little uncomfortable. I'm not gonna lie.
I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry. Anyway, um,
Eesh.
we talked about him earlier. Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard's an interesting one, as I said, kind of underperforms with the Dallas Cowboys. And like you said, there was really no reason for him not to succeed, but he just didn't. The Cowboys, when Tony Pollard was successful, was a slow and fast kind of change of pace with Zeke and Pollard. He didn't have that this season, and he struggled, to be quite frank. I have Tony Pollard to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, you might think this is a bit of a throw off, but Kellen Moore, who he worked really well with under Dallas, is now the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles, and it makes sense in my head. Eagles probably sign Pollard and maybe another guy as well to have that change of pace, work perfectly in a Kellen Moore system. And if Tony Pollard does go to the Eagles, I think he would have more value than if he stayed on the Cowboys. So I see Tony Pollard as like a fifth round running back, kind of like a, if you need kind of a lower tier like RB2, I could see him as that, just a fly guy kind of.
Uh, Philadelphia is interesting for Tony Pollard. I'm not sure how I feel about him pairing up with Kellen Moore again. If I'm being completely honest, we saw Kellen Moore um, in Dallas. He liked utilizing him in that change of pace role when Zeke was getting older and starting to look slower. Um, and that was promising, but we're just not really. I'm not really sure how Pollard is in a lead back situation. That Eagles offensive line still is fantastic, whether or not Jason Kelsey retires. It's still great. Um, and the problem I have with that is, uh, I don't feel confident in any Eagles running back really. They don't like to use them. At least they didn't last year. And they like to rotate guys in and out. They have this crush on Kenneth Gainwell for some reason. They have a crush on Boston Scott for some reason. Those guys just always show up when you want them to the least. So that kind of throws me off for Tony Pollard. If Tony Pollard was a Philadelphia Eagle, I really see him as one of those like late round flyers. Not like late, but like a seventh, eighth round pick.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I am being a bit generous, but I just think like the hype of like working with the offensive coordinator before, kind of like pairing them back together. I feel like people would appeal to that. And obviously,
Mhm.
Jalen Hurts is a nightmare if you own the Eagles running backs in fantasy. But I feel like Pollard could work just because the Eagles, they need a change on offense. Kellen Moore was the guy they brought in, and he's probably going to make a massive change compared to the Johnson guy they had last year. Um, but anyway,
Uh,
uh,
you might you mind if I give my Tony Pollard team real quick
oh
because
yeah,
I
yeah, go
don't
for
have
it.
him going to the Eagles.
Go for it.
So my new team for Tony Pollard is the New York Giants. Tony Pollard's looking for a bounce back, right? There's no competition in the Giants running back room. He would be in line for lots of touches. They're not competing right now. So they find a diamond in the rough on a prove it deal with Tony Pollard, then they can sign him long term the next year or whenever they get their franchise quarterback. Okay. Because this is not going to be the year where they're going to draft a new quarterback or trade for one. They have Daniel Jones on that big old contract that we talked about earlier. It was a mistake, but now they have to live with the consequences. So Daniel Jones is probably going to be the quarterback this year. And I can see Tony Pollard just coming in there as on a division rival, and just getting his touches and hopefully showing what he can do. If he goes to the Giants, I see him in a much more productive role than on the Eagles. I see him getting more work out of the backfield than he was last year. I see him getting more touches in the red zone. I just see a much more productive Tony Pollard if he's a Giant. And if he is a Giant, I'd say more so in like that sixth round area.
Mm. Yeah, I don't know. The thing with the Giants is like I feel like no one really knows what kind of direction they're gonna head in the offseason. No one really it's kind of a throw up in the air, like of what they're going to do with the first rounder. They've got a lot of areas to cover, as you said. Tony Pollard would make sense to the Giants, but I kind of like, I just, in my head, I like Tony Pollard pairing up back with Kellen Moore. Um, and then another guy that's very interesting that we kind of mentioned or we hinted at, I should say, DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift was a beast for the Eagles. He should have had way more work than he did. Jalen Hurts, I know you owned him in fantasy. Jalen Hurts diminished his season to say the least, but Swift still managed to put up 1,000 yards, played very well for the role he had. Traded from the Lions in the offseason, the last offseason. I think he performed well above expectations. It was kind of a gamble. And I have DeAndre Swift going to the Baltimore Ravens. I think that makes a lot of sense in my head. Baltimore Ravens, they need, as I said, the running backs room hitting the free agent market. DeAndre Swift is a guy that can come in and produce immediately. He's not going to want a huge contract like Derrick Henry. He's going to want less. And DeAndre Swift proved he's a workhorse or a RB1 in this league. He can do it by himself. Obviously, there was other guys in that Philadelphia backfield, but he didn't really need them to. It's just how the Eagles function. The Ravens are going to be a contending team again. I think DeAndre Swift is a perfect back for a contending team. And then eventually when Keaton Mitchell comes back, I can see that duo working out very well.
I agree that DeAndre Swift is perfect for a contending team, and that's why I had him going to the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys always find a way to screw around with their cap room, and there's an extra 30 million this year, so there's no reason that they shouldn't be able to figure it out. Like you said, DeAndre Swift showed his stuff this year. He kind of had a prove it year with the Eagles. He didn't get a lot of end zone touches at all, and that's not his fault. It was the tush push's fault. Um, but he still managed to find himself top 5 in rushing yards. We know what he can do as a receiver. We saw it in Detroit. We saw it briefly in Philadelphia. Um, and Dallas, it would be a huge step up for them from Tony Pollard to DeAndre Swift because DeAndre Swift is capable of getting in the end zone in that short range. He's not necessarily a power back. He's actually very shifty when you watch him. He's a patient runner.
Yeah.
Reminds me of Le'Veon Bell in that way. Um, he can provide what the Dallas offense needs, both as a pass catcher and as a rusher, which is why I like that pairing so much.
Yeah. What do you think DeAndre Swift's value would be if he was a Cowboy?
If he was a Dallas Cowboy, I mean, we talked about that Cowboys inflation
Hmm.
when you go to the Cowboys that the ranking goes up. I think he'd be in that early fourth round range. I think that's a pretty safe place to say, like around like 37, 38, around there.
Okay. Yeah. That's fair. DeAndre Swift for me, if he was a Raven, I see him as a fifth to sixth rounder, maybe even higher. I don't know, but I think the thing with the Ravens is, I don't know. I feel like a Ravens running backs are bound to get hurt. Swift is injury prone. Like I feel like that could be a factor. But I think if he was to fall to you in the fifth or sixth round, that's a that's great value. I mean, he truly could be like a I don't want to say RB1, but like he could be like if you're doing zero RB, like that could be the perfect guy to like first guy you have, just a reliable guy that can get in the end zone and catch passes. You can't really beat that value if he lands in it.
No matter what team he's on, if you get DeAndre Swift in like the sixth round, that's an absolute steal.
Yeah.
I mean, I was able to get him in the ninth last year because there was a lot of confusion about who the running back was. Rashad Penny was in the conversation, and Kenneth Gainwell, and DeAndre Swift was like it was questionable whether he was an afterthought or not, especially after week one.
Right.
But he was an absolute steal for me in the ninth round, and I'm convinced that he'll be a solid running back again this year as long as he's healthy, which he was last year.
Yeah. And then finally, another big, I guess, name we should say name value, Austin
Hmm.
Eckler. Austin Eckler underperformed this year. I'm not gonna, pile up the hate on him even more because I think he's hurt enough. And it's sad to see what happened to Austin Eckler because he really was one of the most fun running backs to watch in the NFL. And then there was obviously a dip off this year, but the Chargers as a whole weren't good outside of Khalil Mack, Justin Herbert when he played. Um, I thought Derwin James was underwhelming to say the least. But Austin Eckler, I have going to the Chicago Bears. I think it makes sense. He's not gonna get a big contract. He's not gonna be a workhorse and by any means. But I think just if they're gonna bring in Caleb Williams, or they should bring in Caleb Williams, just another weapon to kind of have in the offense, kind of do some check down passes too for Caleb, just progress up the field. I think it makes sense. It's a veteran guy to help out. The Bears are a quite frankly young team, and I think Austin Eckler could provide some. I don't want to say experience because he's only like 28, but I feel like that would be a perfect like running back to kind of dump the ball off to for Caleb Williams.
That makes sense to me. Chicago seems like a good place for him. Uh, at this point in his career, uh, he would be an experienced running back coming into any backfield, a veteran presence, uh, and he's not aging like fine wine to say the least. Not going to pile a bunch of crap on him because that happens enough.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. So I have him going to Minnesota, which is kind of a curveball. Understand.
Gross.
Um, but
So
but
gross.
I think he's just looking for any place where he would have value, really. And Minnesota is a place where he could bring some value. No one really knows what their quarterback situation is going to look like, which we'll get to later. But the running back room is not great right now. Alex Madison, even though love the dude, uh, he's my friend on TikTok. Um, he wasn't very good last year, especially in keeping the ball in his hands. A lot of fumbles. Ty Chandler was okay. I mean, he didn't really have expectations going into the season, and he became a decent running
I
back,
thought he
but
was
not a
solid when he
starting.
played. I thought he was
He was
solid.
solid when he played, but I wouldn't say he's like a starter.
No, not by
You
any means.
know,
No. Yeah, I get you.
um, I th- I think bringing in Austin Eckler would like it would be an attempt to round out that running back room with a
Hmm.
receiving option. Hopefully, they'll draft someone and not just stick with Cam Akers. Um, but yeah, that's where I see Austin Eckler going because they need all the help they can get, and he just wants to go somewhere where he can play.
Yeah. Um, Austin Eckler for me, it's hard to judge like where he's gonna go because I just feel like his name has been bashed so much this season that like people aren't gonna want to draft him. But realistically, if he does go to a Bear or something and he's just catching passes from Caleb, like he could easily just have like like so many receptions this year. I mean, not necessarily maybe the touchdowns or like the volume you expect out of the Chargers, Eckler, not close to that level at all, but I think he'll still catch a lot of passes or whatnot. So I have him like as like a seventh to eighth rounder. Just because I think there's still a little value
I
there
think
just because the pass catching.
I think Eckler's a nice handcuff option, really. I mean, uh, Eckler has never been the best like pure running back.
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He doesn't run for 1,000 yards, but what he does do is he scores touchdowns. We saw that decrease last year as he was getting less and less work in that Chargers offense, but he scores. So the pass catching the pass catching upside, and then also the goal line touch will be pretty nice in my opinion. So Eckler is definitely worth drafting as a handcuff if he's on one of those teams. Maybe even a little bit earlier. Like he'd be near the top end of those backup running backs, like where the AJ Dillons of the world have been drafted the past few years.
Yeah. Just AJ Dillon just gives me like a weird feeling these days because every
Yeah,
time you believe in the AJ Dillon hype, it just never works out.
yeah, that's why we're not going to talk about him.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, I think we're done with like the major running backs. I don't see anyone else that we've written down here. But now on to Michael Pittman Jr. Michael Pittman Jr. had a pretty good year with the Colts, I'd say. Gardner Minshew came in with AR5 getting hurt, and had a pretty good connection with Michael Pittman Jr. to say the least. I don't see Michael Pittman Jr. on any other team. I think the Colts will tag him just because AR5 is going to need weapons, and Michael Pittman is a perfect like wide receiver one for just a developing QB, just to kind of he's going to rack up receptions. He's pretty reliable, I'd say. He played, and like I said, he played pretty good last year, even with Gardner Minshew. Um, I see Pittman drafted at like the 3 to 4 turn. That might be a little generous, but he did produce a lot with Gardner, and I don't. Obviously, it may be a little less with AR5, but I think he'll still be pretty reliable in fantasy.
Granted, I am a Michael Pittman enthusiast, but I think you might have even undersold him. I mean, Michael Pittman is absolutely, I think he's one of the most reliable receivers in the league. He's a great route runner. He has some of the best hands in the league. Super reliable receiver for a developing quarterback. The Colts have tons of money to play with in a big market. So naturally, there's not going to be a whole lot of money thrown in there. Michael Pittman should come back and be an Indianapolis Colt next year, whether that's playing on the tag or a big contract extension, which I can totally see him getting because he deserves it and they have them for it.
Yeah.
He's someone that they want there. Can be someone that they want there long term. So Michael Pittman's a Colt next year, and I don't really think there's a reason to overthink it. Uh, third or fourth round turn, I think might even be a little bit late. Like he's up there with like the Nico Collins of the world, I'd say. So I'd say like an early third rounder.
Yeah, I could see that, but I think just because AR5 is going to be the core, but I think he's going to be a little undervalued as well in terms of that. And also, like, this is on a side topic, but there's so many guys in this pool this year, like that are like good picks, like or you think would be good picks. Like I'm just thinking of people like that could be in that range. And like there's a lot of talent. I mean, we say this every year, but
Mm.
I feel like especially this year, just because there's so many injuries last year, there's a lot of talent and guys coming back that you're gonna have hopes and expectations for. And then there's new guys that came in as well. So like Michael Pittman, like I'm trying to think of guys in that range, but a guy that I actually have kind of close to him in terms of wide receiver, just because people seem to bash on him or undermine him every year, is Mike Evans. Or they draft him later than they should. Mike Evans, to perfectly transition, by the way, Mike Evans will be a Tampa Bay Buccaneers next year. I don't see him on any other team. I know Panthers are being like shouted, but I don't see that at all. Mike Evans is a buck for life. The only way I could see him leaving is like the Chiefs give him like some crazy deal, but they don't have money to do that really. So Mike Evans, he's Mr. Consistent, and I think Bucks is it's just his team.
Yeah, he said it himself that I mean, they're gonna need to pay him a decent amount of money, and then they also have their own free agents that they need to bring back. Like, he'll even take like he wants money, but he really wants to be a buck. And I think that um, depending on moves that they decide to make at quarterback, uh, he'll stay. And Carolina seems out of the question to me because of question marks with Bryce Young. And Mike Evans has one of the most like untouchable records in the league right now.
Right.
Uh, every single year of his career has been in 1,000 yard season. I don't see a reason why he would want to break that by going to Carolina, who's not even contending. And leaving the city that he loves for division rival at this point in his career, it doesn't really seem like it's on the table to me.
No.
Mike Evans is a buck for life. Seeing him in a different jersey would just feel pretty wrong.
Yeah. And also it's important to mention as well that he won a ring. Like he doesn't need to ring chase by any means. Like, he already has his ring. I think the record at this stage and the city of Tampa Bay is important factors to him. And Mike Evans, I think, is also in that Michael Pittman range of like the late third round, early fourth round. I see that kind of as his range. Cause that's because he's not as much of a sexy pick. I don't see him going earlier, but obviously he can just because he's that good. People always kind of question, like, oh, is this the year he's not going to have 1,000 yards? This year he's going to fall. It hasn't happened yet. And for that reason, I don't see him like being in those higher ranks, but he should not fall like past like middle of the fourth. Like it's still Mike Evans. People need to like forget whatever like disbeliefs they have about him and just rely on him because he's never in his career has never proven that he can't do anything as a wide receiver.
Yeah, he's been one of the most underrated guys in the league for years. He's never someone that gets brought up in like top 5 conversations.
No.
Yet he still finds himself at the top of the ranks in like every statistical category every year. He's an absolute X factor for any offense that he's on. Uh, was always the bright spot on some dismal Buccaneers offenses. And I there's reason to believe that the point he won't be as valuable as he was this year. I'm not doubting Mike Evans' ability to do what he did this past year. But the touchdowns were ridiculous this year.
Yeah.
If we're being completely honest, Chris Godwin was pretty much kept out of the end zone because of the sheer amount of volume that Mike Evans was getting in the end zone and Rashad White's breakout. But I don't see that continuing. Mike Evans will still be an 1,000-yard receiver, knock on wood, and he'll still get his touchdowns. But I can understand him dipping to like that fourth round.
Yeah, I mean, I that's why I said 3 to 4 turn. I just think I think in that range makes
Mhm.
sense for him. But yeah, perfectly said. Mike Evans, very reliable, and yeah. Next guy I have Calvin Ridley. Now Calvin Ridley's been a surprisingly a main discussion point in a lot of like NFL free agency talk for some reason. Calvin Ridley, I'm just gonna say I was a little disappointed with Calvin Ridley this year. I think everyone was. Everyone kind of had Calvin Ridley as a fantasy guy last year. And he was all right. He wasn't bad, but he wasn't the level that we drafted him for. Some people were drafting him in the third round and had him in, a very high tier of guys, and that was their number one target in drafts, including I really wanted him, and I know a lot of people that wanted him as well. And yeah, he didn't adapt to that Jaguars offense as well as we would have thought or as we would have hoped. And at this point in Calvin Ridley's career, he's still solid and he can still add a lot. I have him going to the Kansas City Chiefs. In my head, it makes sense. Um, Chiefs, I guess they're going to need wide receiver help because everyone likes to uh, crap on their wide receiver room, even though Rashee Rice is an animal. But that's besides the point. Calvin Ridley
Rasheed
to
Riding. The Rasheed Riding is so crazy.
but
Glub, 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 glub.
Calvin Ridley to the Chiefs is a good fit. Just provides another weapon for Mahomes. Jags won't look to bring him back just because he's going to cost them a second rounder, and that second rounder to the Jags might be very valuable to them. We don't know, but if Calvin Ridley does go to the Chiefs, I just see him drafting like that wide receiver, like dead zone, like every year where like the Jerry Judys are drafted, so like the fifth to sixth turn around there. Because I don't see him like reaching like high heights anymore. I don't see him reaching that, but I think he'll be a solid guy that's catching touchdowns, provide another weapon for Mahomes, and he's in a lethal offense. You can't really like ignore that.
Calvin Ridley to the Chiefs makes a ton of sense, and I think that's like pretty much the same way I went. I went with Buffalo for Calvin Ridley, but I think it's a very similar situation. Uh, it's contending AFC teams that need help in the receiver room, and Calvin Ridley can provide it. He thinks he's that guy. At least that's the sense I get from him, and he's a super exciting player to people because like it seems like he's pretty new. Like he's kind of it seems like it feels like he's new, but he's not. He's like 30 years old.
Yeah,
We only got a few years really of Ridley in Atlanta, and that's like so unfortunate because I loved him coming out of Alabama, and then he was great that one year. I want to say it was 2021,
that's 2020.
2020. Yeah, he was great that year for Atlanta, at least in fantasy, and we all just expected that to improve, but there was like 2 years in between that, and then Jacksonville was underwhelming for reasons unknown to us, whether he couldn't integrate himself into the offense, whether it was him knocking off the rust, or maybe he's just not the wide receiver one we thought he was.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, remember that year that he broke out, he was still playing next to Julio Jones, even though he was aging. Um, but yeah, I mean, Calvin Ridley in that Chiefs offense, I think he'd be a great complement to Rashee Rice and Travis Kelsey. And I don't see a reason outside of money that he couldn't go there.
mm,
I have him going to Buffalo because I think that they really only have 1 to 2 more years left in this championship window. left in this Diggs era at least.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, and this is some of the best teams that Josh Allen's going to have with him. And I don't think they want to waste that by only having Diggs and Khalil Shakir as his main options. Kincaid's been good, and Dawson Knox has always been a solid tight end, but they're
Yeah.
not like not not in the receivers, not the receivers. The receivers have not been great outside of Diggs.
Yeah, well, the thing with Buffalo is like I feel like every year they're just having so many injuries. Like it's unreal the
Mhm.
injuries list they have. But I think Kincaid is. I mean, we'll talk about tight ends a lot, and we'll talk about Kincaid a lot, I'm sure. But I think he's gonna have a big improvement year. We saw flashes last year, but I think he can be a very solid tight end option. But obviously, we're not talking about that this episode. We will, but just not now. And moving on to a Buffalo receiver, a former Buffalo receiver, we should say, Gabe Davis looks to be out the door already. He's posting weird stuff on social media, saying he's posting like his stats and saying that he's like the best. It's weird. Um, Gabe Davis, I drafted him in 2022. I had big expectations. He was all right, but he was so touchdown dependent. And Gabe Davis was very poor this year. He'd either have like 0 receptions and 0 yards, like a complete donut, or he'd have like 2 touchdowns and have a solid game. It was really weird. I have Gabe Davis going to the Tennessee Titans. There's not really a particular reason why. The Titans need some more weapons with Will Levis. Obviously, they have Hopkins already. They don't really have a tight end. I mean, Chiga Conko is okay, but it's not really I guess, a great weapon. But Gabe Davis can maybe provide like his own chance to kind of break out. I don't want to say break out because I think it might be a little too late for him, but maybe develop more of a role than he had in Buffalo. And with Gabe Davis to Titans, he has little to no fantasy value really. He'll just be like a wide receiver too, so he'd probably be like a ninth, 10th rounder.
Mhm. I like that fit for you a lot. That was a good pick, Gabe Davis to the Titans. Um, it does make a lot of sense considering that it seems like he has this ego about him. He thinks that he should be a main option. All the stats that he's been posting on Instagram are like about yards compared to touches, and that's because he's a deep threat wide receiver.
Yeah.
That's what he is. So Gabe Davis, while he's great at his role, he's not a great receiver. I have in my predictions, I have Calvin Ridley and Gabe Davis flip flopping. I have Gabe Davis heading to Jacksonville. We saw what Christian Kirk did in his 1 year as the sole wide receiver one in Jacksonville, and he had a great
Awesome.
year.
Awesome
He had a
year.
great he had a great year, and he showed why he deserved the contract that he got. That 4 years, 72 million. Um, and I think Gabe Davis would be a nice compliment to that because Zay Jones, aside from his off the field issues, um, is like really kind of their gadget guy in a way. Like he's a slot receiver, makes some quick plays for them. Christian Kirk has the ability to do really whatever they want him to do. And Gabe Davis is the big bodied guy that they don't have. You know what I mean? Big body, really fast, deep threat.
Mm.
I think Gabe Davis fits exactly what Jacksonville needs in their receiving room, and it would be a good fit for the Jaguars' offense.
Yeah, I have another guy going to Jacksonville that we'll mention briefly later, but I don't mind that take at all. It'd be a good opportunity for him. But yeah, I have the Titans. For now, we're gonna move on to probably I'd say the biggest like what if this offseason. I mean, obviously Saquon and the other running backs are huge, but Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is a very key talking point this offseason. Um, and I don't really know where to go with Kirk Cousins because he's 35 and he has to get paid wherever he goes because he deserves that kind of money. He's gonna get paid wherever he goes. But the question is, what team is willing to take on that risk and kind of like because the team that wants to take him thinks they can contend. And I don't think there's many teams in that window that can kind of be like, okay, we need a quarterback. Like they don't many contending teams don't really need a quarterback. I know there's some, but I just have Kirk returning to the Vikings just because I don't really know what's going to happen. I think he'll just get signed like a one final chance in Minnesota, so 1 year, just like a 35 million. Obviously, they're not going to be contending because they're not good enough. But I think that's just like the mindset of the Vikings because they can't really do that much this offseason unless they trade up, which to do so, they'd have to give up a lot. So Kirk Cousins, in terms of fantasy, would just be like a backup quarterback, like he's always been. Nothing major.
Such a cop out answer from you, and that is so boring, and I'm so upset with you for that. Just to keep things fun, I picked a different team. I can also see this happening, but it was also in the spirit of keeping things fun.
Yeah.
Um, Talking realism here, Minnesota for another year or two does make sense for Kirk because he's a super nice guy. He likes Minnesota. He also always gets his money, but I think you talked about how he's 35 years old. He's never really accomplished anything in the NFL in terms of playoff success
No.
of any kind. And there's but he is very often a quarterback that finds himself in the playoffs in at least I think so. Like for a while with the Vikings during Kirk's tenure, it was like every other year the Vikings would make it. It was really
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
Um, but Vikings will not be good next year. They weren't great this year after he got injured. Even before he got injured, they weren't good. Um, but they're not in a position to contend. And I think Kirk Cousins might want to finally contend. Another team that's been a perennial playoff maker, but hasn't really done anything, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think that that's a match made in heaven. The reason for this being the defense is really good. The defense is fantastic. The Minnesota defense, while Kirk has been there, has been they've had pieces, but they've really been short of like great, good even at some points.
Right.
Reminds you of the Chargers defense, how they have these big names, these really talented players, but then they really just don't do anything on that side of the ball. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I know you get it, and I know JTC Fouts gets it. Um, but I think Pittsburgh makes perfect sense. It's a offense that has pieces that in a ton of untapped potential because of their situation at quarterback. It seems like they're ready to move in a different direction from Kenny Pickett. The players are behind Mason Rudolph right now. I think if Kirk Cousins goes there, they'll definitely get behind Kirk Cousins. They'll keep Rudolph around. They'll probably end up cutting Pickett or something like that. That sounded
Jeez.
zesty. That sounded so zesty when I said it. I was like, Pickett. They'll probably end up cutting Pickett. But yeah, I just think Kirk to the Steelers makes a lot of sense. He's a game manager type of quarterback, but he's an elite game manager. One that can get the stats for you, one that can really elevate your team.
Yeah, I understand your reasoning. I just don't know how aggressive Mike Tomlin wants to be in the quarterback market. Um,
But before you continue with that point, I just want to say Mike Tomlin, although he's had so much success in getting the Steelers to the playoffs, there's also been so much talk about him being on the hot seat for years now because he never gets them anywhere. I feel like if there's going to be a time to be aggressive, it's now while they have the defense, while they have the offensive weapons before Pickens gets completely pissed off and Deontay Johnson leaves to go elsewhere. Uh, I think this is the time if
yeah,
they're going to
but
make a quarterback move.
I feel like with the Steelers at least, like it's just a very like at least like in terms of the media displays of like Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, it's a very like toxic like offense, I guess, and just the way like they didn't believe in their quarterback. And I know Pickett wasn't he sucked honestly, but I don't want to diss Kenny Pickett because I don't like bashing on guys, but yeah, I just feel like it's a toxic kind of like environment, I guess. I just don't know if I really see I don't know if I really see Kirk as a Steeler, if that makes sense. I just can't really like picture it.
I think he brings the team together.
Yeah, maybe.
It's been a toxic environment only because Pickens is NFL young boy and he hasn't had a quarterback, and I really think that he has the potential to be like a really good receiver in this league, but he hasn't had the opportunities. Like we saw a few games last year where Pickens was just absolutely dominating the competition.
Yeah,
Like against the Bengals later on in the season, he had a great game.
yeah,
Um, and that was with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. Imagine with Kirk Cousins at quarterback. He's literally the best in the business at doing what Mason Rudolph does.
Fair enough. With Kirk,
Yeah.
also just to mention, he is coming off a torn ACL. Teams might be conservative with that as well. Also,
Mhm.
kind of my consideration of why maybe the Steelers might not bring him in just because they're a little, I guess, worrisome of his situation, which is fair. But the guy I have going to the Steelers, um, is Russell Wilson, and I know it's kind of gross. I know, but I think the reasoning I had is the Steelers just kind of want a cheap and like quick fix, and Russell Wilson's publicly come out and said like it's okay if I get like a veteran minimum, like he just wants his chance. I think Steelers is a perfect opportunity to do so. Obviously, just get away from Denver, get as far away from Denver as you can, Russell Wilson, because you are not welcome there. And they signed Russ for like a cheap 1 year, kind of just like a gamble, but not really an expensive gamble like Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins would be a really expensive gamble that might not pay off. If they sign Russ, it's kind of like, it's whatever. It's a brush off the shoulder. And again, he wouldn't have any fantasy value if he was on the Steelers, just because it's at this point his career doesn't have much value.
My issue with the Steelers signing Russ is exactly that, the low risk part of it. Because the Steelers, that's what they've done. They've made the low risk moves that get them into making the playoffs, and then they don't do anything. And I think it's the fans are really starting to get sick of it. The Steelers fan base is one of the best in the NFL. There's so many of them. You can find them anywhere in the country. I live in Oklahoma, and I'm overwhelmed by the amount of Steelers fans that live here. It's pretty surprising, honestly. But there's, I think they're really starting to grow sick of the fact that they're not doing anything. Uh, you have arguably the best defensive player in the NFL right now, in T.J. Watt on your team. You only have him for so many years, and you're going to want to take advantage of that, having an elite defense, still having Cam Hayward as he gets older.
Mm.
Having Minka Fitzpatrick, who at this point in time is one of the best safeties in the NFL.
He's hurt all the time. He is
Yeah,
hurt all the time.
yeah, and Joey Porter Jr. was a great addition as a rookie this year. Like they have too much talent to be wasting it away with non like competitive teams. So I think that taking the low risk move is just out of the question for them at this point.
Yeah, I understand that, but I feel like with Russ, it's like that whole Denver situation was just like cursed from the beginning, and I think he does deserve like another chance. Maybe not with the Steelers, in your opinion, but I think the Steelers does make sense just because that like it's like a cheap like they can afford if it doesn't pan out, just because
Mhm.
like they're not gonna be in cap hell because as I said, Russ doesn't want a huge contract. Because I think he still gets paid by the Broncos no matter what team he goes to, right?
Yeah, yeah. He gets his buyout money if he gets his
Yeah,
buyout money.
so it doesn't really
Um,
matter to him.
yeah.
And now move, or if you want to say something, I don't know if you did.
Yeah. I got to get my Russ team.
Oh shit, sorry.
Yeah, you're good, bud. You're good. I have Russ going to Minnesota.
Okay.
Whether that be, well, he'll start the season as the starter is what I'm projecting. I have this weird thought in my mind about a potential like trade for a young quarterback that's unproven, like maybe a Trey Lance or something like that. But I think Russ makes sense for Minnesota just because they don't really have direction, and Justin Jefferson is upset. His money depends on whether they get a good quarterback or not.
Mm.
I think Russ has a chance to redeem himself. Like his stats were pretty good last year if you look at them. The play on the field when you actually watched it was underwhelming, but at least his stats are back. He's not doing what he did the year before where he's being super conservative with the ball. Um and I think that in the Minnesota offense with O'Connell, he has the potential to go back to putting up some pretty big numbers. Kirk Cousins put up pretty big numbers, and uh, at least like 2 years ago, you would never put Kirk Cousins and Russell Wilson in the same sentence. We've seen 2 years of Denver since then, but I mean, I think that Russell Wilson in the Minnesota offense could do some really good things for his career and even continue to keep their star player happy.
Yeah, I don't hate that, but as I just noticed, we literally just had our Kirk and Rust interchanged. So I mean,
Yeah.
we have similar like bases, but for different reasons, kind of thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, And now another, he's not a free agent, but it's very like hinted that he's going to be on another team this year. It's Justin Fields. And Justin Fields, wow. I mean, it's so weird with Justin Fields because obviously for fantasy, he was pretty reliable when he did play, but actually for the Bears, I don't know if he was the answer to what they needed. Obviously, the Bears fans seem to love him, but I think they are, as we discussed, gonna take Caleb. It seems like all the cards are pointing towards there. For Justin Fields, this is in my head. I've said in my head about 100 times this episode. I apologize. I'm gonna try to use a different phrase. But Justin Fields to Las Vegas makes a lot of sense to me. The Raiders need a new quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo is completely gone. He's being suspended. He's going to be cut. They just need to move on from Jimmy G. It didn't work out. Aiden O'Connell, he's not starting quarterback in the NFL. No offense to Aiden O'Connell, but you just aren't. And Justin Fields, I think, could be perfect. Kind of a good like gamble. Could really work out, could not. But Justin Fields with Devontae Adams could be very interesting. We saw how good Justin Fields and DJ Moore were. Imagine Justin Fields with Devontae Adams. That could be very interesting. And I think the Raiders, Antonio Pierce comes in, really a culture guy, it seems. Justin Fields seems to kind of fit that kind of culture of the Raiders, and I can really see that panning out well. If he does go to the Raiders, I have him as like a low tier quarterback one, but like, yeah, there's a lot of upside there, obviously, as I mentioned.
I just hate the image of Justin Fields on the Raiders. I really like just can't see it, and I think part of it is because I have this like perfect, beautiful image in my mind of him getting traded to the Atlanta Falcons. Um, and how much I love that fit. He'd be the most dynamic quarterback they've had since Mike Vick because Desmond Ritter sucks. Matt Ryan was awesome for them for years and years and years, but he's a statue in the pocket. He's a pocket quarterback. Justin Fields is electrifying when he's on the field, and at least from what I'm understanding from this new Raheem Morris regime, they're going to let their playmakers make plays. This offense is going to be electric as long as they have the quarterback that can get the engine running. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Bijan Robinson should be much better than he was in his rookie year. He's come out and said that he wants to run for 2,000 yards, which is not
wild.
happening. Not happening. But like I'm so excited for this Atlanta offense, and I think adding Justin Fields to that mix would just make it even more exciting than a rookie quarterback like Jaden Daniels or a Drake May, someone like that. I think Justin Fields, we've seen what he can do on an NFL field, and just the wow factor that he would bring to an already ridiculously athletic and talented first round pick offense in Atlanta. It just makes perfect sense to me. He's from Georgia. Like all the all the
Parts.
stars are aligning.
Yeah,
All,
okay. For
all
both
the all the
sides.
stars are yeah,
Both
all the
sides.
stars are aligning, and I think it just makes perfect sense. And I really don't want to see him go somewhere like Vegas.
Damn. All right. My bad.
No. Like I understand your take. I think it makes sense for the Raiders to trade for Fields because with their pick, they're kind of in the middle of the pack, so they wouldn't be getting one of the top end guys. It would be like JJ McCarthy maybe, and that's even a maybe at this point.
Yeah.
But that's not someone that's going to elevate your talent. It's not like that's not
Yeah.
a guy that's going to want to keep that Devonte Adams is gonna. It's not gonna move Devonte Adams. He's not gonna
No.
want to stay because JJ McCarthy's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It was really a toss up between Atlanta and Raiders. I just lean towards the Raiders because I have this envision. And also I guess I'm kind of maybe I have a bias against Atlanta because they've proven to be a little unreliable the past few years, and maybe I'm just a little hurt by that.
But the mustache man is gone. The mustache man is gone, so it's okay.
Yeah, maybe. But moving on, Baker Mayfield. Um, I mean, let's just keep this simple and
Yeah,
quick. He's re-signing with the Buccaneers. He played great.
he has to.
There's no other reason for him not to. I don't see him on another team. The Bucks can't really do much in terms of like another quarterback in play, but they're not even going to factor that in because Baker was their guy last year, and there's no reason to mess with that at all.
This is
Um,
a what I like what you did for me, I do for you situation. The Bucks gave Baker a chance. You know, I mean, I guess you can look at the Rams last year, signing him for those 4 games. They gave him a chance, I guess. But no, the Bucks really gave him a chance. They gave him this contract this year to be their starting quarterback. I There was discussion in the beginning of the season, like the offseason, that it was a quarterback battle between Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask. I don't think that they signed him with that being the vision. Baker Mayfield was the starting quarterback day one, and he just completely flipped the script on what people thought he was as an NFL quarterback this year. There was points at the season where his stats straight up looked better than Patrick Mahomes. Not saying he's better than Patrick Mahomes. We saw what Mahomes did in the playoffs. That doesn't need to be explained. But Baker Mayfield did a fantastic job in that offense this year, and there's no reason for Tampa Bay not to bring him back. There's no reason for him not to come back to Tampa Bay. And
Yeah,
I'm sure Mike Evans would love if he stayed in Tampa Bay too.
he would. He definitely would. Another, I guess, big name you should say, but has definitely fallen off in the past few years. Odell Beckham Jr. The Ravens signed him to like a 1 year, 22 million, something like that.
It was largely like incentive based, I think,
Yeah,
but
but
it was still a lot of money for Odell.
yeah, I feel like now he's just kind of living off name value, but obviously, he had a few like nice plays last year, but nothing major, nothing to write home about. Really nothing, anything that's fantasy relevant. I just see Odell Beckham kind of returning to New York, not the Giants, but to the Jets. I don't know why. I just kind of see
Mm.
him being with Aaron Rodgers. Kind of could work out maybe. I mean, he's not going to have a lot of volume, but with Garrett Wilson, I could just kind of envision that. And it makes a lot of sense. Just kind of return to New York. I don't think the Giants are going to look to resign this because they have so many issues. They can't be signing a guy like Odell, but I think the Jets can, and it's kind of a gamble that maybe could pay off if Rodgers connects with them well.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense to me. He can't go back to the Giants. Just how that relationship ended. I'm sure Giants fans would love to have him back, but there's no reason for him to go there. He's proven to be an injury-prone wide receiver. He's obviously getting up there in age, and he won a ring, but he wasn't really on the field for it.
Well, he did like tear his ACL in like the first
Yeah,
quarter.
yeah, no, I'm not blaming him for it. I'm just saying that that's what happened. Like
Yeah.
he wasn't on the field for it. I think he wants to contribute to another ring. That's why he joined the Ravens this year. He brought something to that locker room that we haven't really seen from him. He actually brought a leadership role.
Mm,
Um, which I mean, like in his tenure in New York and in his tenure in Cleveland, we didn't really see that. We saw a
yeah.
diva
Bit of a
wide
diva.
receiver.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Odell turned out to be like a great leader in that Baltimore locker room this year. And I think he's going to want to sign with another contender. The Jets does make a lot of sense. There was a lot of talk about that in this past offseason.
Yeah.
But another team that there was a lot of talk about this past offseason and before that was the Dallas Cowboys. And that's where I have Odell going.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think Michael Gallup stays around. They paid him a bunch of money for him to do absolutely nothing. And I don't see him sticking around. I think Brandon Cooks is on like one more year for his deal.
Yeah.
Odell makes sense to bring in for a contending or a team that's trying to contend. I'm not going to say a contending team.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Um, and Dallas is where wide receivers go. Big name wide receivers go. That's where they go. They go to Dallas at some point. The diva wide receivers of the past that are the biggest names in football that have some of the best stats in the past few years. Like they go to Dallas, and I think that makes perfect sense for Odell. He can even bring something to them that they don't have potentially. If that leadership role isn't overstated, he can bring some veteran presence into that Dallas locker room, and I think he can really help them in a big way.
Yeah. I don't hate that at all. But I think the bottom line with Odell's he's just going to go to like a big market team that can
Mhm.
contend. I
And
think that makes sense.
yeah, and fantasy value obviously isn't
None,
really there anymore.
none.
He's a late round guy, like a late round guy.
Like
He's
13th, 14th
yeah,
round.
yeah,
Like,
he's essentially like a streamer.
yeah, perfectly said.
Yeah.
Um, Next guy, a guy kind of hinted at before. to go to another team. I have Curtis Samuel going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. As you said, as we discussed, Ridley's going to leave most likely, and they're going to need another receiver. Zay Jones has a lot of off the field issues. Curtis Samuel makes sense. Curtis Samuel is an awesome wide receiver, by the way. Like I feel like
Mhm.
he's heavily underrated just in terms of like he can make some big plays for whatever team he's on. He showed flashes on the Commanders and he played really well for the Panthers when he was there as well, but he's never really got the volume. I don't think he'll ever get that volume that we kind of maybe want him to. But I think the Jaguars is a good fit for him, just be a wide receiver too there, fit in well to system. Again, as you said, a streamer, probably like a 12th rounder if he's on the Jaguars.
Yeah, I'm Curtis Samuel on the Jaguars. If I think that's a good fit. He's just also kind of like the other guys, in my opinion,
Mm,
which is why I don't think that they would try and reach out for him like that. Curtis Samuel has been one of the better gadget players in the NFL over the past few years, but he's so much more than that. He's a very good receiver. And when I was thinking about where Curtis Samuel might go, I was trying to think of teams that really could use that like a Deontay Johnson could use like a Deontay Johnson because that's what I kind of think of Curtis Samuel as. I think they're somewhat comparable players.
interesting. Okay.
So the team that came to mind for me was the New York Jets. Uh, I found out very recently that Curtis Samuel is from Brooklyn. So that would also be a homecoming story, which is also always fun.
Yeah.
And wide receiver two is a need for them. Alan Lazard. I mean, I have a love for him because I'm a Packers fan.
Juice of the day.
Yeah, juice of the day is awesome. Big lads, and he's one of the best blocking wide receivers in the NFL. But the receiving, for a receiver, you want more receiving, and he doesn't really bring that. So Curtis Samuel, I think, would be the perfect two man for Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson really does it all, and Curtis Samuel would just be a great compliment to him, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, I don't hate that. But I just feel like with the Jets, they just sign a bunch of like random receivers. I don't know if that's like an appeal, honestly, to like the wide receiver market anymore, just because it doesn't seem to pan out well. But yeah, I do like your reasoning for that. Next guy, kind of fallen off the past few years ever since he signed in New England. We kind of didn't see him reach the heights. He's shown flashes, but not the heights he reached on the Chargers, and he was really good for the Chargers, in my opinion. That's Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry.
Mhm.
Hunter Henry's hard to call because a lot of like great, as you mentioned, we were talking before this. A lot of
Mm,
good teams don't really need a tight end, but a team that I think could need a tight end that are a playoff team is the Los Angeles Rams.
mm,
Higby is aging, not very well. He's not aging like wine, unfortunately. Higby is still a solid player. He'll still be on the team. But I think they'd like to bring in a new weapon there just to kind of, keep up with Puka, Cooper Cup. And Hunter Henry's a great red zone threat, great touchdown threat. Just a really solid player, good blocker. He's going to be a backup in fantasy, very little value, but I think as a tight end too, that there can be some upside there.
yeah, it's always nice to have a safe tight end too on your team, and I think that's exactly what Hunter Henry will be, no matter what team he's on next year. Um, on my end, I see Hunter Henry as, I mean, Gerald Everett's a free agent. He could potentially go back to LA if it weren't for their cap issues, and I don't think Hunter Henry would be their main target.
Yeah.
Uh, they have some other stuff that they need to address, but that would be fun. But the team that I do have is Indianapolis because of all that cap space that I mentioned earlier when we
Mm.
were talking about Michael Pittman. And my second reason for him signing there is Mo Alley Cox because Mo Alley Cox is not great. He's a fun name to say, but he's not that good. Kylan Granson is hasn't lived up to any sort of little hype that he had. And
Jelani
then
Woods.
Jelani Woods is nothing to write home about. So I think Hunter Henry makes a lot of sense there. He's a solid blocker. He did well in New England. His production has fallen off from LA, which was very pass heavy. But I mean, when you go from LA to New England, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think that there's still a lot of good tight end play left for Hunter Henry, and Indianapolis is a good fit for him.
I do have a question for you.
Yes.
Mo Alley Cox or Austin Hooper?
Jesus Christ. Oh no, you got this from that other TikTok. Yeah, no. Dude, when I saw that video of the four guys arguing about Mo Alley Cox versus Austin Hooper, I died laughing. There is no reason to have that conversation for more than 2 seconds. Oh my god.
Just having a
And they
little
were getting
fun.
they were getting heated.
Yeah, yeah. Ignore that. Don't listen to that. This is an inside joke, kind of. But moving on to another tight end that's hitting the market. Dalton Schultz. Dalton Schultz. He's been a very solid tight end the past few years. In his latter years in Dallas, he was pretty good. Moved to the Texans this offseason as a guy, to provide a weapon for CJ Stroud, and he did his role perfectly. He caught some touchdowns, played his role well, complemented their wide receivers. I don't see any other reason for him not to resign. And if he does resign, like I think we all are, anticipating, he'd be like the last tight end one or like a high tight end two, kind of because there's a lot of tight ends that are progressing and could have a lot of upside next year.
Again, talked about the Texans cap space earlier when we were talking about Saquon. Yeah, I think Dalton Schultz comes back. There's no reason for him not to. He had a very productive year. Um, he's been productive the past few years. I think there's should be mutual interest for both Houston and Schultz to want to come back, run it back, and maybe even get a Super Bowl ring in the next few years out of it. How awesome would that be?
Yeah, maybe. You never know. Kind of quick on Dalton Schultz because I feel like there's not many
Yeah.
other teams in contention for that. But Marquise Brown, another guy that's destined to hit free agency, leaving the Cardinals. I'm a Cardinals fan. We traded a first rounder for Marquise Brown. Did not work out. I mean, he looked solid in his first season, got a lot of receptions. He had like 13 receptions in a game or something like nuts like that with
Mm-hmm.
Kyler. Or maybe 10, maybe 13 is a little high. But Marquise Brown, he's destined to leave the Cardinals because they're going to draft a guy in the draft. I see Marquise Brown as a New Orleans Saint. Kind of random, but I read something that the former wide receivers coach at the Ravens is now in New Orleans. He played pretty solid in Baltimore, and I could see him like linking up with him again. New Orleans kind of needs some help. Michael Thomas is done. And he could actually complement Chris Olave pretty well and Rashid Shaheed as well. I think that could work out pretty well.
Yeah, Hollywood has really developed his game over the years. The production hasn't shown that, but I mean, what he was in Baltimore was really just fast. That's what he was. He was fast, but now he's a pretty solid route runner. The hands aren't exactly there, but he's a solid route runner, and he's still really freaking fast. So Marquise Brown is a nice piece to add to really any offense, uh, as long as he's not your wide receiver one, which he was in Arizona, and I think as a wide receiver too, he can really thrive. So where I have him going in my absolute like dream team is Atlanta.
Of course.
Um, dude, this Atlanta team in my mind is just so freaking good, and it's gonna terrorize the league for years to come. So my idea is that Marquise Brown goes to Atlanta because Arizona doesn't want him back, right,
No,
Luke? You
no,
you are Arizona. Do you want him back?
no.
Okay, cool. So he could be a great wide receiver too for an upcoming team, an electrifying team with Bijan Robinson, with maybe if Kyle Pitts turns things around. Jonnu Smith is still a very solid piece. He's very athletic. And then Drake London, wide receiver one, and potentially Justin Fields quarterback. Like, oh my god, I feel like the opportunities are endless with this Atlanta offense. It's like it would be like a baby Niners, in my opinion.
Jeez, dude.
I'm sorry, I think that's just the vision, in my opinion. Like the offensive line is really good too. Like
Yeah,
Chris Lindstrom is one of the best guards in the NFL. Jake
he's
Matthews has been a mainstay for years, and I just really like it. I really like it.
yeah. I mean, Atlanta needs something because the past few years have been brutal for them.
Uh huh.
I don't hate that. I just my Saints take was just kind of random. It's kind of I guess a gut feeling. He should still have some fantasy value, Marquise Brown, because like as you said, as a wide receiver too, he should have some value. I could see him going in like the ninth, 10th round.
Hmm.
Something around there. I think that's pretty fair. Just because there's a lot of rookies and whatnot, they're going to have more hype than him, but he should still have a solid role wherever he goes. And now the last guy we're going to talk about in this episode, because there's only X amount of free agents of significance, I should say. Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd had some great years in the Bengals. Really kind of like a mainstay in those Bengals teams. I don't see him resigning unless he's signing some like vet min, but I don't think he's going to want to do that. Um, it's interesting. I have Tyler Boyd to the Philadelphia Eagles. I just think he could maybe take like not a vet min, but a cheap contract to help the Eagles' offense flow. Obviously, Julio Jones is gone. Um, Sad to see how his career ended, but that's besides the point. And then Tyler Boyd can just come to the Eagles, kind of provide cover in case Smitty or AJ Brown gets hurt or something like that happens. I think that'd be a solid signing for the Eagles. Give Jalen some more weapons. And he doesn't really have much fantasy round, probably like a streamer, I really like that word. As a 13th,
Mhm.
14th rounder.
Yeah, Tyler Boyd. I mean, this is kind of one we're just spitballing. I mean, Tyler Boyd has been phased out of the Cincinnati offense for a large, a large part of his contributions have been cut out and given to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins over the past few years. But he's been around for a long time, man. I mean, he was the longest tenured player on the Bengals up until this year.
Yeah.
Uh, and I feel like Cincinnati fans would be sorry to see him go. And I really think that there's a high chance that he would come back on a really cheap contract just because he's been there so long and like he fits them so well. He's been there through thick and thin and now they're a contender. Like it makes sense for him to come back.
Yeah, definitely.
But the team that I really think just makes a lot of sense, like this is completely based off of fit. Okay. I think that Kansas City makes a lot of sense for him because he would be a cheaper wide receiver contract. He's a veteran that would complement Rashee Rice as opposed to the guys that they've been signing, like Juju Smith Schuster or an MVS or Mecole Hardman. Like those guys are all like just kind of gambles that you're taking. Whereas Tyler Boyd is really just what you're getting, like solid wide receiver play and a veteran presence in the slot. Um, I think Tyler Boyd would be a great fit for Kansas City. I really like the fit more than anything. I think that he might not do this because of the rivalry between the Bengals and the Chiefs over the past few years. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
he would personally feel about doing that. But then again, I don't know Tyler Boyd. Maybe he wants to go win a ring with Patrick
Well,
Mahomes.
the thing is with Kansas City, like I feel like with always like a Super Bowl like contender, like for off season, like there's no reason like a Chiefs is going to be a higher appeal than other teams just because you want a ring. I think that's perfectly fair. And although the Chiefs and the Bengals do have, I guess, some recent rivalry, I don't think Tyler Boyd's really stressing like you know, I think if he has an opportunity to get a ring, like he'll go get a ring. I think that's
Yeah.
fair to say. And any other player would take that opportunity as well, unless you're a complete money diva. Um, but yeah, that kind of wraps it up.
I, um,
Go on.
just one more thing. I'm sorry.
You're good.
Um, just because I have a soft spot in my heart for this guy, I just want to mention him. He's not going to get a starting role on any team. I'm not going to make a prediction for what team he's going to go to. Um, but I just want to shout out J.K. Dobbins, who's an upcoming free agent. He's very talented. He's just dealt with injuries his entire career since his rookie year. And I hope that he finds a team that'll treat him well and get him going in the right direction.
Yeah, I just hope
That-
he can stay healthy.
yeah.
That's the one main wish upon him, just because the last few seasons have been brutal for him.
Yeah.
He definitely has some value, but it's a low risk, low reward. I mean,
Yeah.
actually, it could be high reward if he plays to
Yeah.
his ability.
Yeah. He's
But
talented, man.
yeah, but it's
Uh
hard. It's hard to rank him just because he hasn't really
yeah.
played much in the past 2 years.
Yeah. And Antonio Gibson will probably go unsigned for good reason. Um he's like really bad. He might as well switch back to receiver, get a special teams role, muff a few punts, and then get cut again. He'll be great in the CFL.
Anyway, Um, but guys, just keep in mind these are all hypotheticals. These are just some predictions. We're just having fun. I'm actually these free agent predictions are pretty popular on Twitter and whatnot. So we want to do our own take on it. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of fantasy implications here. There's a lot more than recent seasons we've seen, and it's going to be an exciting off season. We're going to be covering all the free agent signings. We're going to be providing our insights, our fantasy value, and whatnot. And obviously, draft season's approaching soon. There's a lot to look forward to, a bit of a dead zone, but we still will have a lot to talk about. Um, Before we go, Ink, do you want to plug the socials?
Yes, absolutely. You beat me to it. So, yeah, follow us on TikTok, keepin.it.spooky. Follow us on X at just keeping it spooky, plain and simple. If you're watching us on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, keeping it spooky pod. And if you're an audio listener, shout out to you because we don't really have that many of those. So, shout out to you if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Please give us 5 stars, subscribe, turn on notifications, and we're super happy that you're here listening to us and enjoying football with us.
Yeah, and we're having fun. We're not looking to stop anytime soon, so don't bank on that. And yeah, we'll be back on TikTok. We're gonna be hosting a lot of trivia, stuff like that. And then on Twitter, we're gonna try to stay very active in terms of free agency because obviously we want to give our own insights, and then we'll talk about it on here as well. But thank you guys for watching and listening to another episode of Keeping It Spooky, and I will see you guys soon. See you.